before I jump into the presentation, I wanted to just take a moment to share how grateful I am to have this opportunity to work with Arlene and Sharon Lynn. It's been everything. Also, a big thank you to the co-fellows for being vulnerable and sharing your experiences throughout the journey. I cannot go without thanking my mentor, Stacy, as well as my agency supporters. They were dying to be on this call, but we're going to do it internally for them, as well as the leadership that brought this overall project together. Before we go to my next slide, I want to also point out that my presentation um, is going to speak about foster parents and adoptive parents, because in the city of Alexandria, well, in Virginia as a whole, you have to foster for 6 months before you can actually be considered an adoptive parent. Also, I use some references to the foster parents as resource parents because they are often referred to in our state as resource parents. Some quick facts about Virginia: we do have over 120 child welfare agencies. I am just one in Northern Virginia. We are about 3 miles outside of DC. So if I wanted to, and I don't, I could actually walk to the Ritz-Carlton, something that has come up often. The city of Alexandria is a small city. We serve, or we have about 159,000 people, give or take, in the city that's documented on the census. So no matter which part of the child welfare continuum you take a look at in Alexandria, you'll see that over 90% of the families that we serve are African American or Hispanic. And despite having a diverse community, we still struggle with recruiting, developing, and supporting our foster parents of color. I'm sorry, for our children of color. And over 50% of our adoptive families are white. So, in order to increase the resources, I do believe the agency should consider the recruitment strategies, the transracial adoptive training protocols that they use, perhaps using a racial equity lens, and also referring to experts such as Monique, who presented yesterday, who has a curriculum to support children of color in foster care placements. We are doing some things already in the city of Alexandria to support children of color. We are having an annual ethnic hair care training. I actually developed this training in response to the need of our children of color in white foster homes. They tend to come to the agency with their hair not necessarily presentable. Foster parents also struggle with understanding the importance. So the training targets families' lack of knowledge around those areas. It's a hands-on training and it's very fun, actually. The other thing that is promoted within our agency is encouraging families to support children's food preferences as it pertains to their culture, making sure that we either bring in family who can support carrying out traditional foods eaten in their biological families. We have had birth families bring and cook meals for the foster family and also teach the foster families how to cook the food so that the children will eat properly in their homes, also exposing them to their native language. We've done 3 disproportionality studies over the past 4 years, I believe, in our agency. All of the disproportionality studies show that we have a high number of children of color in our custody. There are no, at this time, targeted interventions. I do believe that our racial equity work that we started in our agency will lead to some policy changes that will impact disproportionality rates. We have requested for a targeted recruitment position due to funding because of, I guess, the pandemic or anything else that goes along with that. That position has been put on hold. I spoke with that supervisor who will be covering that position, and she explained that the position will manage the recruitment needs of any child who or any large number of people who are in our custody that need help. So for instance, if the need shifts from children of color to, let's say, large sibling groups, then she would, or that person would then recruit for foster parents who want to cover large sibling groups. So that kind of was still concerning for me because it really doesn't speak to the agency committed to the fact that children of color specifically need foster parents to meet their needs, despite their numbers being high or low within our agency. There was also a racial equity in-service training for all of our foster parents. This training did not necessarily address, let's say, the disproportionality or the transracial adoption. It only addressed racial equity issues as it pertained to the climate change, if you will, around the George Floyd murder. So right after that, our agency was, or the City of Alexandria was hosting a lot of talks and sharing spaces, if you will, for that. Now, I do not embrace data at all. It definitely scared me when we had to talk about this topic. So I leaned on one of our fellow coworkers. Her name is Kristen, and she's awesome. She is our quality assurance social worker for child welfare, and she helped me with these numbers and charts. So you'll see in the charts for the City of Alexandria's children as a whole that it's pretty diverse, still predominantly white in the City of Alexandria. However, if you look in foster care by race, you can see that 50% of that population is African American. You will see also that 38.3 is white, but that doesn't necessarily totally reflect our accurate numbers. So if you advance to the next slide, you'll see the breakout of ethnicities in the white category. So in the City of Alexandria, it's broken out by Hispanic and white non-Hispanic. So the Hispanic population in foster care is 35.2%, which is higher than the City of Alexandria as a whole. The demographics of the transracially adopted children, as based on 183 open adoption assistant cases in 2019, just shows here and confirms that, yes, predominantly white families are adopting our children of color. But I thought it was interesting that we do have one child who was adopted by an African American, still considered a transracial adoption. So, of course, all of this information is quite concerning for me. The high number of children in care is something that I had to adjust to when I came to the City of Alexandria. I started my career in a rural locality where the children in foster care reflected the general population. So the lack of targeted recruitment also struck me as odd because the diversity in the City of Alexandria is so great. One thing that really stood out was that I looked at the limited number of foster parents and questioned whether or not recruitment was really taking place in diverse areas. And I recall one day on my way to work, I came through a neighborhood that was predominantly white, and a recruitment sign stood on the, or was hung on the outside of a foster care agent, or like a private agency. It said, "Be a foster parent, be a hero." And as I drove closer into my specific building at the City of Alexandria, I never noticed any signs that recruited for foster parents. So there goes that. I think that there was a missed opportunity at that moment. The clinical implications of messaging on self-esteem and sense of well-being is something that is concerning. I do believe that children are always watching, they're always listening, whether we have verbal or nonverbal cues to them. The deprivation of culture is an issue for me, as well as the impact on reunification and life connections. Life Connections is one of our core competencies that we train our foster parents on. We use the Bridging the Gap model. For those of you that are not familiar, that is a model where we bring the birth family and the foster family together so that they can support healthy life connections for children, especially in the event that they cannot be reunified. In that instance, we often see in our agency where our foster families and our birth families, they don't connect, and there's a huge cultural difference there that our birth families often speak to the workers about and not feeling comfortable with engaging with the foster families that are present. The lack of racial cultural identity as well and the readiness to face racism is something that I often worry about, and I'll speak more about that when I talk about the literature review. So, reiterating my PICO, if targeted recruitment is conducted to increase potential adoptive parents of color, and if parent support is provided to those who adopt transracially, will the adoption resources increase in the city of Alexandria? I do believe that once kinship is ruled out, children should have the best resources available. It's important that their caretakers see their beautiful color and understand their cultural needs. We heard a lot about this yesterday throughout the presentation, and I think it's something that should be noted and taken seriously. So, when I looked through the literature, I saw a lot of promoting of transracial fostering and adopting. There was limited information on the impact of the child of color. That voice was missing. The experience that they've had and their preferences was not captured in the various articles that I saw. Achieving permanency is something that was promoted, and the training aspects were around enrichment of activities, culture, taking the kids to museums, making sure they knew the language, basic things that my agency is doing, but again, lacking that long lasting impact on not being raised in your culture. I wanted to understand a little bit more, so I had a conversation with Dr. McRoy. She presented at our kickoff training, and she discussed her presentation a little bit more in depth with me, I believe. She took the time and was able to provide insight regarding her experience. She validated my process up until that point and what I was going through, and kind of confirmed that I was on the right track. In trying to make this shift with the City of Alexandria, I wanted to make sure that I had all of the tools in my toolbox, if you will. I also wanted to know what the adoptive families of children of color needed and could benefit from. So I interviewed 12 adopted families. In regards to how I did it, I hosted 2 support groups for families who fostered transracially. The focus was to understand their needs, what they had been through, and what they were looking to add to their own toolboxes to support the children who were already in their home or who they anticipated coming into their home. I developed a fact sheet also with my communications team that displayed our disproportionality rates and discussed the benefits of fostering and the needs of our children of color. I outreached the community organizations that serve families of color, and I also provided the information sheet to those people through email. There were lots of findings. The transracial adoptive parent interviews went very well. I can say that the the racial climate at that time definitely impacted those interviews. They were long. I thought they were going to be 10 minutes. Some were over an hour. They were very emotional. There was lots of questions, lots of feelings of being lost, not understanding how to support their children of color. I recall one family in particular shared that they had recently relocated to Atlanta, Georgia, where it was less diverse in the community that they lived. She didn't think to look at that before relocating from Northern Virginia when she took her Black son there. As he began to have challenges in school, she went to the school to connect with the principal to say, hey, I need something for my son. I need a mentor, someone he can connect to in the school, and someone of color. She said it took her several weeks for the principal to get back to her, and they were not able to find one African American mentor for her son, which was concerning. She did not feel like she had the skill set to connect to African American resources within her community. Also, um, families felt that they were not equipped for the attachment needs of the children, as well as not understanding how race could impact the attachment, which is a whole nother research project. Parents that were confident, I had two in the group. One was a school teacher, and the other worked for the Equal Opportunity Commission in our area. So she was very familiar they both were very familiar with working with people of color. The other findings that I had regarding the support group with transracial resource parents, they found it very helpful. That was reassuring because the topic of race never came up in their support groups. They did have the racial equity training that I mentioned a few moments ago, but that was not a support group. So in this support group, they had lots of questions. They shared their personal experiences and encounters and struggles. They were able to talk with me as the facilitator of the group, as well as other foster parents who were adopting transracially. One of the foster parents in the group also shared his experience, which was very enriching. His experience was that he had led racial equity work in his work and now was starting to see how that was trickling over into his role as a father of two African American children. There was some fragility in that group. All of the participants were white. I need to add that, and so there was some fragility. I was not surprised. I was prepared for that, as the research definitely showed that when foster parents are looking to adopt transracially, that it's painting a pretty picture. So race and racism and all of those things never really came up. So I don't think that the foster families were equipped or had the mindset that this would ever be an issue that they would have to face, especially in Virginia. And there was also general care and concern about the children in their homes. So I had my COVID experience, right? And the impact of the pandemic show up most in this area. I outreach 25 community agencies. When I say community agencies, I'm speaking about churches, alumni associations for universities, African American fraternity and sorority chapters, as well as educational supportive agencies within our community. We have a lot. 25 for such a small city is a lot. And that's what was documented on the internet when my intern went through and checked for these agencies. Again, I provided them with that fact sheet and invited them to a virtual informational session. The turnout was very low. That was very disappointing. It was actually a moment during this whole project where I was feeling a little discouraged. Our experience with outreach in the community for other practice changes, such as kinship care or family engagement meetings, has been such that we go out to the community, we sit down, we may invite them to our agency, we break bread with them and have a face-to-face conversation. And through engagement in that way, we're able to bring people on board with our mission or our goal. And so that did not happen. And I believe that that is one of the reasons why my turnout was so low. Also, I think people were just tired and burned out from getting on conference calls. via Zoom. So that's, again, the impact of the pandemic. So it leads me to some recommendations for our agency. I believe our agency should tap into agency staff who share interest in this topic. Throughout the process, I have been plugging that I am in this program, that the program is great, and that I am doing a research project to increase African American and Hispanic resources for adoptive children. And I've had a lot of colleague to say, that's great, let me know how I can help. So I believe that our agency should look at an immediate group to develop a work group for our agency, because we are waiting for the position to be funded. Of course, the long-term goal is to have a recruiter, but still that recruiter will need some support so that the focus of children of color is not lost on any other pressing need. Develop and implement a training curriculum for families who foster and adopt transracially to be delivered pre and post approval. I saw a Red Table Talk. It's a web series on, I believe it comes on Facebook, and it's where Jada Pinkett Smith was interviewing Kristen Davis, the star from Sex and the City. She spoke about how if it wasn't for her pre training before becoming approved as an adoptive parent, that she would not have been equipped to support her African American daughter when she faced racism. That came earlier on in the process of her parenting. I believe her child was in maybe preschool or kindergarten when her child first was a victim of racism. Had she not been trained on the various racism factors, such as wording and people judging her daughter for her skin complexion and not wanting to incorporate her in play, she would have never been able to go to the preschool or kindergarten principal or leader to say this is not right and something needs to be done. I also believe that there needs to be a respite program. We currently only approve people who want to foster or adopt, not just provide respite. And I believe that when you have a group of people who haven't been doing a job such as foster parenting, that you may want to expose them to that and build connections with them through respite. I believe that if a person has the opportunity to bring on a child for one night or give the foster parents a break for the day, that they may connect with that child and they may say, you know what, I want to do this long term. Also, I believe that if they are not able to do it long term, they may connect with the child to say, hey, you're in a transracial adoptive family. I can be your auntie, I can be your mentor or whatever that family may need. I believe that our child welfare staff needs training and support so that they're equipped when they're going out into their home visits with foster parents in transracial situations so that they can identify areas that are lacking. I also believe that when you are recruiting, you need to understand the needs. And right now, our person who does our recruitment work, she's a white lady. She's been doing it for a very long time. She's very knowledgeable. She's a great trainer. She trains the Pride curriculum, but she is not equipped to talk about racial equity issues that our children of color face. I also believe that we need to identify race and cultural supportive resources within the community and help foster parents learn how to build their own network. I think that when the foster parent moved to Atlanta, it was an indication that that was a missed opportunity for us to give that person the skills or support her as she develops her own skills in that area. Also addressing the internal factors that lead to disproportionality. We are doing racial equity work within the City of Alexandria. My agency in our city is one of our pilot agencies, so we do have access to training, and that is trickling down. I do believe that those policies that need to be changed that's laden with systemic racism will eventually be impacted. And I also believe that we need to develop partnerships with African American and Hispanic community agencies. We in Alexandria have pockets of African American neighborhoods and businesses and churches and Hispanic neighborhoods of the same, where we can go into those neighborhoods where they have established community agencies and make official partnerships with. This is different, I should say, from what I just mentioned about foster families being able to go out and make their connections, but a larger statement from our agency that says we value our connection with your community agency and the community that you serve. So we want to make official partnerships with you all so that they can help bring foster families in, they can help meet the needs of these children and take those children back into those communities where they rightfully belong. And the potential impact of the Action Research Project, there is support already being given to foster families through those support groups that I mentioned. I do believe that there will be an increase of support for children of color, an increase of confidence of the caregivers through the training, an increase of the partnerships that I just spoke about, and opportunities to lead, not just for myself, but other workers in my organization. In my experience with the NPLD program, the support from Arlene and Sharon Lynn, like literally there's no words. I don't know if I was going to a counseling session. I mean, they caught me literally hanging up from so many crises this past year. They talked me down, they talked me through, they led by example. I can go on, and I'm going to run out of time. So I'm going to move on from that. My sparked interest in macro social work. If you asked me a year ago, I would have said, heck no, I want to stay out of DC. I don't want to do any macro work. However, I've been bitten by the bug and I definitely am here for macro work. Sign me up, get me out of the local agency. I'm ready to do it. Increase motivation with current leadership position. I'm a leader. I recognize myself as a leader even more so after this project and this experience. However, I was not as motivated, but this experience has definitely motivated me to lead in my current position. Better understanding of PICO. I still don't like data. I probably am never going to, but I embrace it. And I like you, Sharon Lynn, and that's all that matters. Experiential learning and the use of not relying on these just being buzzwords like evidence-based practice. I can now have a better appreciation for evidence-based practice and look at it more carefully, policy and data as well, and really not brush it off as a passing trend. And also the importance of my role as a minority leader and how that affects the children of color that I serve and those family members, as well as my workers of color. And my workers of color, I was presented with an opportunity to lead differently and give my worker who is new and 26 what I needed when I was 20, in my early 20s, coming into the field. And the kickoff event was amazing. So I also want to highlight that the presenters were great and the connection with fellows was life changing. So here, the next two slides are just my references, so you can click through those. Are there any questions?